From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our panel, Authorship in the Digital Age. I am Sarah Burns, a DPLA board member. What we're going to do for the next 45 minutes is I will introduce these guys, then have a series of questions for them. I hope that they will start talking and squabbling amongst themselves. And we'll do that for about half an hour, and then we'll open up the floor to you for your questions. So, introductions. On my very left is Robin Sloan. He grew up in Detroit, went to school at Michigan State, where he co-founded a literary magazine called Oats. He has worked at Poynter, Current TV, and Twitter, and at all of those places his jobs had to do with something about the future of media. He is also the author of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore, which I had the very great pleasure of helping to bring out into the world, and actually started as a short story published on was that KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing?
It was.
KDP.
Back when that was still kind of weird.
Right, yes, exactly. And I checked yesterday, we have actually, that book has been published now in 30 other countries, which is really very exciting. And he lives in the Bay Area. Virginia Heffernan writes regularly about digital culture for the New York Times Magazine. She is also the author of the completely wonderful cult novel, The Underminer, which she wrote with her extremely funny friend, Mike Albo, which I recommend you get if you haven't read it. She holds a PhD in English literature from Harvard, and has a new book coming out called Magic and Loss, which I've just finished, and it really actually changed the way I thought about the internet. She looks at it not just merely as technology or a business tool, but as a piece of art in its own right, and then applies critical tools in looking at it. And I think it's going to blow your mind. And she lives in Brooklyn, near me. Yeah. Then Craig Maud is a writer, designer, and photographer, I think I'll say, who triangulates between Japan, the Bay Area, and New York City. He's written for The Atlantic, The New Scientist, The New Yorker, the Virginia Quarterly Review, and the New York Times, among lots of other publications, and then also online. And I really recommend that you go to his website, and I think you'll probably spend a lot of time there reading his essays because they're fascinating, and have actually just been published in 2015 in Japan and in Korea. Is that right?
Right.
So his essays are on topics as varied as walking, which he loves to do, sushi, but also on publishing, especially ebook and app design in the digital space. Just very briefly about myself, I am a literary agent at the Gernert Company. I represent fiction writers, adult and children's fiction writers, and nonfiction writers. I spent some time on what we call the publishing side of publishing, which is on the editorial side. When my first job in publishing, I worked on a typewriter, and we did our P&Ls with a calculator and a pencil. So we have come a long way since those days. I wanted to start at the beginning, which is actually the creative process. Because as something of a suit, I've always been really fascinated by the creative process and where ideas happen and how they get executed. And a book for a long time was one single consciousness onto a page. The digital world has really changed that. And sort of what is created and for whom and how fast. Speed is something that I've talked to many of you guys about. And so, Craig, actually, I thought we would start with you.
Sure.
Because you wanted to talk about fast and weird books.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in that, sort of how those are created and how they then get out into the world.
Yeah. So a lot of the essays that I've worked on online actually have been really slow, weirdly. So an idea will take hold and I'll kind of sit on it for 6 months or for a year. And then finally I'll realize, okay, now I know how to write about that thing.
Right.
Or I'll write, like when I did a Kickstarter for the book Art Space Tokyo, the proposal for the Kickstarter was written in September, and then the Kickstarter happened the next May.
Is that because the project itself?
It was just kind of prep. So I think the interesting thing about digital is you can kind of like dip a toe in really quickly. And then I like to take a step back.
Right.
So this is, when I did the Kickstarter, it was back when you had to get permission to do the Kickstarter. So like you're emailing the founders of Kickstarter saying, I have this cool thing I want to do. Is it cool if I do it? And then they vet it and they read it and they go, okay, yeah, well, we're going to let you do it. And so I got the permission, and then 8 months later, I was like, all right, now we can finally do it. I feel like we're ready.
Right.
But fast books, so as you said, I've been slightly obsessed with walks over the last couple of years.
He writes wonderfully about walking.
So in Japan, I live mainly in Tokyo, and Japan has a lot of beautiful pilgrimage walks that are, these paths that are 1,000 years old or 1,200 years old. And they're really accessible and they're really easy to do these walks. And I've done 10 or 11 in the last 3 years. And the last one I did was just 2 weeks ago. And I pulled out Dan Rubin, who's a great photographer, and another friend of mine, and the three of us did this walk for 8 days. It's called Kumano Kodo. It's one of the old pilgrimage routes. And the goal was, Dan and I had wanted to do a book together for a while, a photography kind of collection. And I said, all right, Dan, let's do this walk, and then we're going to hide in a house for a week. This house in the countryside that a friend of mine lent to us is old. It was freezing. It was a 150-year-old sort of Meiji-era Japanese sort of mayor's house that was kind of being converted into an inn. And we took it over. We mailed a printer to the house. And I love, Robin knows I love this printer. Sarah knows I love this printer. Brother laser printers are one of my favorite things.
Write it down, everyone.
They're incredible. They're like $80. They kind of last forever. You can buy cheap toner if you look online. You don't have to buy the real stuff. And we just blew through like 6 toners in this old Japanese house. And we printed out all the photos we took. It was like 3,000 photos. And then we just started curating. And the goal was we had 5 days to go through all these photos from this walk we had just done, meditate on it, come up with some subset, and then make that a book. And we did. We finished last Saturday, so just a few days ago. And it's done. We have the whole book done. And now we're just negotiating with Blurb to get some quotes on slightly special printing for print on demand. But the goal of the whole thing is from experience to shipping a book globally, where we take on as little of the onus of kind of warehousing and dealing with shipping logistics as possible, but still produce a beautiful thing, a beautiful artifact. The goal is to do that within about a month, and I think we're going to hit that.
Wow.
That's pretty fast.
Will there be an ebook as well?
There's going to be a website.
A website.
No ebook, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to shape an ebook around this stuff. And it's a lot of work, and it feels like the payoff isn't, I don't find the payoff to be quite there. So we're going to we have this beautiful template for a website where that maps the route. As you scroll, you can kind of see where we walked,
cool.
and all the photos. As I was walking, I run this program called Moves. It's an old app that was bought by Facebook. It still runs. It's constantly running in the background. And what you can do is, if I'm shooting with a camera that doesn't have GPS data, my Moves is recording GPS data 24 hours a day of me, which is kind of creepy, but also kind of cool. I have 3 years of data. I can literally import this into Google Maps or Google Earth and have Google Earth fly me through the last 3 years of my life, street by street,
Wow.
which is like weirdly compelling.
Yeah.
And so we're able to layer this data on top of the photos, and so we have pretty precise GPS data and elevation data for all of the images. So we map that onto a map, do a little JavaScript, and as you scroll, it does this beautiful thing and shows you the photos and shows you where we were. So it's kind of it's a nice artifact too.
That's very cool.
Now, Craig, when you, actually before you embarked on this walk, when you were imagining starting this project, it sounds like you had a vision of this book, and it might have been a blurry vision. You didn't know how thick it was going to be, or you certainly didn't know what the contents were going to be, but you could kind of see that shadowy form, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, I think it's, to this question of creativity and where do these projects start, where do writing projects start in the year 2016, there's this kind of way of thinking about stories and content that you sometimes hear. You hear it in newsrooms or from some of these new multimedia companies that aspire to produce content on all platforms, and they'll say something.
Synergy.
Yeah. I'm gonna make a contention here, and I'm curious to know if it resonates with you two at all, because you might have actually very different ideas or different kind of temperaments in this regard. What you often hear is, what we need to do? We need to take an idea and then find the best medium to express it in. And I think that is a lie. I think that is not how things emerge in the world.
That's not the way my industry works. That's not the way I think about it.
And I mean, you can I guess you can hypothetically imagine how someone would go through that process and arrive at that would make a great picture book. But it has no actual correspondence to the way that any of my projects have ever emerged. I mean, you mentioned the short story version of this thing that later became a novel. The reason it existed, I mean, this is the truth, the ground truth. Craig and I both have sort of a romance with the Kindle screen, the tactile properties of the Kindle screen, and just the way it looks. It's kind of weird. And it was my enchantment with that screen, my first experiences with it, that made me want to write something for that screen, to be on that screen. So the format and literally the material, in a very real way, called forth the story, the writing. And that's been the case. You can just go down the line for almost everything I've been produced. Everything I produced.
Can you talk a little bit about Julie Rubicon and how?
I mean, that's the bookend. Yeah, there've been all these examples of things along the way. And the most recent was a story that I wrote for Facebook, on Facebook, and it was not me. This is just, you can find it on my Facebook page. It's free to read. And it was, again, it grew out of not a sense of I've got a story, who just has a story they want to tell? I don't even know what that means.
Right.
Instead, it was a fascination with this medium, the Facebook note as a thing in the world, and the way, seeing how they spread and seeing them kind of filter into my own feed and thinking, dang, that's interesting. This is just the aesthetics of it and sort of the assumptions built into it and the kind of things that get written as Facebook notes that a little bit okay, it's 10 o'clock at night, I probably shouldn't be writing this, but I'm going to write it anyway. Publish. And so starting from that, I sort of developed this whole story that became this weird sci-fi thing, and then became something that was my first foray into Facebook publishing. But again, it's for me at least, it begins with form.
It begins with form. That's interesting. Virginia, you have spoken in other contexts about hyperlexia that we're sort of inflicted with. Is it fair to say that we are? And some of it is because the ease of that kind of publishing, of that you can just put something up on Facebook, and but it's also true that you said that the internet. I'm going to quote you, is the latest and most powerful extension and expression of the project of being human. So could you just talk a little bit about that, tell these guys what hyperlexia is and how you see it, but then sort of I guess the question is then how do we manage it?
Yeah. So the idea of hyperlexia is that we're reading too much. We're reading all the time. And we just heard the education panel talk a little bit about the digital divide and concerns about failing literacy. But we're in a society that finds reading so intoxicating that we won't even stop driving we'll risk highway fatalities in order to keep reading and writing texts. I think in some ways the ease of publishing is in fact a response to the crabbed difficulty of writing in the 20th century, the heyday of writer's block, the heyday of the New Yorker, that if you didn't squeeze something into the New Yorker in the so-called lapidary style, like it's etched in stone, where I remember growing up with the idea that every comma was sweated over, that if you were a real writer, you spent all this time on your M dashes and and like a spelling error would be, a crisis, some kind of psychological crisis.
Robin has just recently written about M dashes, I believe, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Not at all. We're in a very typo-friendly culture now, gaffe-friendly culture now. I just wrote something about Trump and Twitter. Well, let me back up and say that following on Craig's being inspired by the idea of making this book really quickly, and Robin's skepticism about whether we all have a story to tell and we're just looking for the medium. We all heard the expression of the medium as the message and sort of either thought it was opaque or just mystification, or it sunk in. But some of us decided to take it seriously and just kind of live by it. And I think that is like, part of the project of being me is to say, there is no Trump without Twitter. There is no Robin's book without the Kindle screen. Like it just, you are working back from that and to get a little abstract, the technology is speaking us, and that was, so back to the New Yorker, one of the points that students of 20th century poetry have made is that 19th century, the long line, the sort of Whitman line and that effusive style suddenly became, because you had to sell an ad against it in the New Yorker and also run a poem against nonfiction, against spot art and so forth, and cartoons, they became short. And once they became short, you just built this bottleneck that like the hardest thing in the world was to overcome your writer's block. The New Yorker writers famously like retreat and they can't get anything done for 20 years, and that's real writing. And fake writing, and so I really, I grew up largely online. This, accident of network computing meant that in the ARPANET era, as a child, I got online at Dartmouth College and was playing like D&D style games, like kids now, except that it was 1979. I knew that there was that kind of writing and reading, but that was false writing and reading because it was like close to TV, and it was just bad somehow because it was masquerade, because you were, I was 9, I was pretending to be 18, not to find predators, but to, although I was probably open to a little of that, but I also was, I wanted to be able for people to mistake me for someone who could talk coherently about Reaganomics. And I couldn't, in the classroom, I, didn't have a leg to stand on to talk about the Cold War or, later Reaganomics, but online I did, and I wasn't especially comfortable in physical space, and all of a sudden I was comfortable, like writers forever, on the page, with language, with symbols, and so forth. So that was happening on one level, and on the other level, I wanted to be a poet, and what I knew of poetry was the New Yorker poem, and what I knew of that was that it was just so hard that you would get, the ideal writer's story was you got 50 rejections, and then you finally got this one poem in or 3 poems in. And so those two things sat uneasily with each other. There was this digital world of like proliferation, YouTube appeared, and all of a sudden it was like everybody had just been waiting. It was almost like a civilization was unearthed instead of an art form started. It was like everybody had been waiting to post 4-minute videos. And all of a sudden, just huge numbers of them went up. And then also these polyglot comments. And the YouTube comment section is like notorious for being rabbly, and it's just, whatever you think of mobs, you probably think of the YouTube comment section. On the other hand, supremely literate, like hybrids of Asian languages and English and emoticons, and I don't know if you can use emoji or whatever now in YouTube comments, but so that in the beginning of Web 2.0, I was like, oh, that strange literacy that I remember from our Dungeons and Dragons meets Reaganomics meets I don't know, there was a lot of like Damsels and Steeds and Led Zeppelin that sort of influenced our language in the 70s online.
There was a while when every computer server was named Gandalf.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Like every
exactly.
university, it was that you could tell it was the same, the analog of the same person every university. It was like, just go, Virginia, just like set up the servers. And you're like, don't mind if I do. Small.
Mordor. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, for some reason that was like where you lived. And that's another medium as a message thing, is that, these Tolkien worlds, Star Trek and so forth that formed all these communities really, like when they found tech, and in another idiom, the Grateful Dead, when they found tech, they were just like, where have you been all my life? It was like, I think, doesn't your husband write about self-digitizing communities, or at least he spoke to me about
he may well.
like something, but it was like something about like the Greeks being somehow self-digitizing. I mean, this is beyond my brain, but that in ancient times there were, there were cultures that almost like presaged or acted digitally before digital. So anyway, those things all interest me.
We'll get him here next year.
Okay, good. When I discovered, he might have been telling me about another field of study that he was, anyway.
Right.
But, so I went to work at the New Yorker as a fact checker, and still while I was there, before anything was online, and as a fact checker, it was about very sharp pencils and this red and graphite-y combination where you were crossing out letters, and indeed every letter had to be checked because we were keeping alive that idea that was supremely elitist, that only we could do this thing, and that we were like had some unique qualification to do it. Craig brought up sushi, and you might have told me this, or maybe I learned it in Tokyo, that in America we think sushi is incredibly difficult to make, and you have to go through all these guild procedures and like whatever. And then when you sort of learn that it's like raw fish and a little bit of wasabi and so forth, you think like, why is this so hard? Well, it's hard to bottleneck it so that it's like, to keep a kind of guild system alive. So that you have to like mop the floor for a long time, and it's all that like wax on, wax off thing, so that until you become grand master of this thing. And that's what I discovered at the New Yorker, And so at the same time, Slate and all these online magazines were appearing, and it was just like, write it, I just like wrote something really fast. It went up online. There were 500 comments. I remember one of them was, does your mother have any children who don't have brain damage? Andrew's fine. My parents are here. My brother is fine. And I was like, this is so different from this, world that was the real literacy, the real literacy. One thing I say in the book is that reading scrolls, Torah scrolls, was for scribes only. One of the innovations of the Roman Empire was to create the Codex, what we recognize as a book now. Those were supposed to be illiterate because they were so easy to find your place in. It was because they had pages that broke it down for you. That's not even real reading. Real reading, you have to supply the vowels. You have to like keep your eye, finding your place was what only certain people could do. So it is amazing to me, and it was a great panel in education, but it's amazing to me to hear people talk about how we have to cultivate this literacy that can like only happen here at the Library of Congress when, we're creating entirely new languages at this like incredible speed. It's so far beyond emojis. Like anyone, it can't be easier. It's probably equally hard to learn ancient Hebrew as it is to learn like really high speed use of GIFs.
Yeah.
That I don't understand.
Yeah.
You're like halfway through typing Wolfman Jack into something, and someone comes with a GIF. It's like they read your mind.
And it's like the product of a GIF sommelier.
Yes,
so
totally.
Tuned to the
totally.
moment.
Remember Anil Dash is like, he can find a link so quickly on Slack. Like,
some people keep GIF stashes. I think that's
Yes.
The real high level thing is that you have if you're using your computer, you actually have a folder on your desktop, and it's like spring loaded, ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm curious. It's amazing to hear you talk about that sort of this new endlessness and this new kind of profusion. And it makes me realize that for all I know about your opinions, Craig, about the way these things work, I don't actually know how you feel about that, like the endlessness, the profusion. I know you love edges.
I love edges.
I know you love. I know
And
you love
margins.
things. I know you love things
Margins.
that can be finished.
I do, yeah.
Right?
Well, I think it's important.
And so, I mean, it might be worth talking about that for a second, because that's certainly relevant to, again, thinking about what you're going to produce and how it's going to be packaged. But does the like whoomp of YouTube or whatever, does it like
Of the whole thing.
Does it make you like scared or ecstatic?
I
or-
think it makes everybody scared. I mean, I think would be to say that when you first, I mean, I had a fantasy, I think a lot of people did, that like one day I would kind of read every book that existed. And the first time I saw Google, it was like this Faustian overwhelm. Like, I'll never be as smart as Google. And I was defeated on the first day, like Kasparov when he lost to Deep Blue at chess. I lost my will to play.
over.
But back in the beginning when it was just Yahoo, it was almost doable.
Right.
Right.
There was a
It was like-
time.
it
There
was
was
like
a time when
you could look
sort of
at it and
thought,
go, yeah, I could.
Yes. Yeah. But for all of us, there's a moment. This thing is too big to be read. My moral choices are often about choosing not to read.
Well, my greatest sadness as a child was realizing I wasn't going to be alive to see 2100. Like I kind of had this, I had like this moment in a car
Yeah.
where I went, I can't wait to see 2100, and like how many years is that? I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be alive. Like, and so my whole fantasy of heaven was a VCR that allowed me to like go through time.
And get your move. Get
my
track
moves
and-
data. Yeah, no, but no, the over.
Cloud, that's the heavenly cloud.
I'm beyond being overwhelmed. I'm just excited. I love
Yeah.
YouTube is one of my favorite
Yeah.
things in the world now.
Incredible resource.
I am so obsessed with YouTube. I have, and mainly in part because they've done a really good job with subscriptions, with being able to draw boundaries around the craziness of it, of exploring. Like the YouTube apps on iOS and iPad are really phenomenal now. They're like some of the best apps out there. And
Are
like,
you making any videos? Are you doing?
no. Video is like, it's so much, that's the thing I feel like could still be optimized, is like the ease of making video is not nearly as easy as it is to do text,
Yeah.
to do the comments. That said, Snapchat I've been using the heck out of, and I only do video on Snapchat.
You and my
Yeah.
children.
That's it's actually really fun. And the ephemerality, I mean, Robin, I know you're a Twitter deletionist. The idea of like not having things stick around, not having that like archive is kind of compelling in a weird way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But specifically, let me sharpen my
Sure.
spear point a little bit. As
good
an
there,
author, as someone who is creating things in this world, and so not just as sort of a consumer or an enjoyer, but as like someone who wants, like, you want people to have this book and enjoy it. Does flinging it into this world that is suddenly like so much vaster, is that like, how does that feel?
You're talking about the walking book.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just
Like the
Yeah,
walking book,
yeah.
for example. Yeah.
You've made something with edges and you're throwing it into edgeless space.
Oh well, I mean, it's exciting, right? Because with that edgelessness comes access to people. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet. Is like you put a thing up there, and potentially 1 billion people can read it. That's pretty exciting, And you just kind of have to deal with this part and parcel of that
It is online.
that bargain.
It's online in PDF. Or...
It's not out
Right.
there yet.
But people
Oh, right,
will
but
find
it
it.
will be.
That's
But
all
it will be.
It'll be the website. And you asked if I was going to do a digital book.
Yeah.
I like the lines between what is and what isn't a digital book. I mean, are so fuzzy, in my opinion. Is an EPUB inherently the only way to be a digital book is a PDF? Suddenly, then a digital book. I mean, is taking a PDF of a website then a digital book? I feel like making a website can be as much a digital book as an EPUB.
Sure,
I mean,
absolutely.
EPUBs are effectively websites.
Or a book that you can acquire only online. I think there's a lot of things like that. Like there's a whole genre. This is something interesting to note in the world. A whole genre of the like many generations now descendants of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Indie role-playing games, kind of like
Yeah.
deconstructed
Yes.
and built back up.
Yeah.
And they're all sold exclusively as like $5 PDFs.
Yes, the $5 PDFs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah.
the photography world is.
That's a Tim Ferriss thing. It's like, Tim Ferriss like just thinks you should be able to make your entire living in 4 hours a week, and he's just like, the first thing you need to get is a PDF because people will pay to download it, and you like
funny.
tease it and carnival bark it in all these ways that the secret is in this PDF, and it'll be 3 pages. Because one of the things we're talking about, this New Yorker thing, is because we're writers,
Yeah.
we are and an agent, like all of us are determined to jack up the value of
Yeah.
what we do.
But
Yeah.
in terms of people making money with digital books,
Yeah.
the photography community has nailed it. Like there are guys just printing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, selling PDFs on how to like use Lightroom better,
Oh, yeah.
or do iPhone photography.
Right.
Like the photography world is so okay with PDFs.
Right.
And there's no other way to do it because you need all these screenshots.
Yeah.
And a PDF is so much easier to make than an EPUB.
Yeah.
And anyone can do it, and they put it up on their website, and they sell it using, Stripe or whatever, and it's just, it's just a download.
Yeah.
It's so effortless. But
Yeah.
I more than any other community, I've seen the photography community embrace the PDF as like a true book, a true book of like how to do photography.
Let me tell you a weird thing about making books valuable again, making content valuable again. Acuity, the insurance company, a couple years ago decided that they were going to publish their annual report in a pop-up book. And pop-up books, including Pat the Bunny and the mass-produced ones, all are made by hand. There's no way, I mean, they make them in China, but each one, there's no machine technology involved. And what they did, what it did, because all the other annual reports were circulated digitally, some of them PDFs and so forth, was they created demand for their annual report. And they'd had a great year. And all of a sudden, everyone wanted to get their hands on the Acuity annual report. I mean, it was like, at some insurance, whatever, it was the talk of the whole thing. And, and I also recently talked to the lawyer for Scholastic who kept the last J.K. Rowling thing offline until the release, last Harry Potter novel. And it meant she had to be in like, I don't know what they call them. It's like the equivalent of clean rooms or rubber rooms or something where there's no Wi-Fi. And they had to like create computers and printers and stuff that never, and no phones, nothing could have any Wi-Fi access. So it's like creating the edges, creating the margins, creating the like, there can only be 40 of these pop-up books. And like there will never be a 50th. And even if you took flat photos of it, even if you whatever, you can't make another one of these.
Right. Well, and I think the proliferation of the infinitude of the internet has made these things even more compelling, right?
Right.
And that's why, I mean, with this photo book, for example, it's like we can put most of the photos up on Instagram, but without those edges, and also just seeing photos big is sort of compelling in and of itself. Without the edges, I don't know, it's somehow, I think people don't take the time to really look at it, to really give it a moment. And so a pop-up book is
a good call,
super
right?
powerful way of doing that, yeah.
So I've gotten through about a quarter of my questions here. But I'd like to open it up to you guys because I'm sure you have questions too. And if you don't, I'll just keep going. Are there questions out there? Yes.
One of the first things that attracted me to the work of Craig was his fascination with Japan, living in Japan. And one of the things that bothers me about the internet is that we all experience it very personally, especially as U.S. citizens of wherever you live. You're going to see the internet in a different way. So I wanted Craig to talk a little bit about what does the internet look like for a young person in Japan right now? What are they doing on social media? What types of things are they reading from a literary perspective?
Or Myanmar.
Well, or Myanmar, yeah. I just spent 2 months in Myanmar at the end of last year. Myanmar's fascinating just because 2 years ago, a SIM for a cell phone cost $5,000-ish, and last year it went down to $1.50. So it's a pretty big drop. And then they opened up, the government realized being a military dictatorship wasn't helping them much, and they started opening up markets, and now there's 3G coverage kind of all over the place. And you have a bunch of farmers sitting on buffalo playing Clash of Clans, which is kind of cool. Japan is funny, right? I mean, Japan, a lot of times when people talk about Japan and things that come out of Japan, there's this Galapagos phrase that's thrown around. The Galapagos Keitai, Galapagos cell phones. Japan, if you I moved to Japan in 2000, the first cell phone I got had a camera. It was a color screen. It was this clamshell thing. I mean, it felt magical. I mean, really, like there's nothing else in the world like it. And none of those cell phones were exported because none of them were built to work on, global sort of cell networks. It could only work in Japan. A lot of the functionality they built for it was only workable in Japan. You could use a cell phone to pay for stuff at convenience stores. Of course, it only worked in Japan. It was all proprietary protocols. The internet on those phones was called, on the Docomo network, was called iMode. So you weren't accessing the open internet, you were accessing iMode. And you had to, if you prostrated before the Docomo gods, maybe you got in the iMode menu. If you got in the iMode menu, then you were a billionaire. It's like, there were all these weird gates to it. And so the internet in Japan, and I'm by no means an expert on the internet in Japan, but it kind of evolved in this weird way where while we were embracing blogging not with pseudonyms, we were ourselves blogging. Blogging became a thing where, Kate Lee and others said, oh, hey, we can publish these folks. This is, to your point about this being real literature or not, being recognized as something that can be made into book form, that should be out there. These people should get a platform outside of just the internet. Japan kind of evolved in this kind of funky way. And you had things like cell phone novels, which a lot of people point to, which, by the way, is totally not a thing.
Because American publishers are totally fascinated by that and we'll do it.
For a millisecond, someone wrote a novel on a cell phone, and someone wrote about it for the New York Times, and then that was it, forever and ever. Japan, there are two fallacies about Japan. One is that it's technologically advanced. It's totally not. Everyone faxes things, and you go into government offices, and it's like going back into 1950 here in America. And cell phones have not really evolved at all either. Everyone uses an iPhone now. That was really weird. iPhones sort of leapfrogging everything in Japan, much to the sadness of Sony and Toshiba and Sharp. But then also the cell phone novels really aren't a thing. Japan has not, they just got the Kindle 2.5 years ago, right? So Japan's 6 years behind on Kindle. The publishers were really against it. I've never seen a Kindle in public.
Wow.
And then iBooks, I rarely see anyone using an iPad to read books. If they are, they're reading comics. And that's a pragmatic sort of choice, because comics, they're published weekly in these things that are 600 pages, and they look like phone books. And so, 10 years ago, you'd have people reading phone books on the subway, and they're very disposable. You get through the phone book in, a couple hours. And so if you can do that on your iPad, that's a little bit nicer. But for the most part, bookstores are thriving. My neighborhood, I moved in next to my favorite bookstore in the world. It's the most profitable bookstore in Japan right now. It opened 3.5 years ago. Just as Borders was closing here, this bookstore was opening, this massive.
Is it an independent store?
It's not. It was a DVD rental company that started doing bookstores, and they had this idea of, let's make this kind of shrine to books and magazines. And it worked really well. And so the internet in Japan and literature kind of don't overlap that much in what I've seen. And one of my good friends, Motoyuki Shibata, is one of the preeminent translators of American fiction to Japanese. He runs this great journal called Monkey Business. In the States, it's Monkey Business. In Japan, it's just called Monkey. And nothing is online. And they have all these wonderful art. I keep poking him. I've been poking him for years to get this stuff online, and there just isn't that desire to get it up there. So it's a very strange relationship, but Japan is still very, very analog on a whole.
Yes. Would you like a mic?
Well, I'll try to.
Yeah, here comes one.
I was fascinated by Virginia Heffernan's. I'm Bob Darnton. I was fascinated by Virginia Heffernan's characterization of the New Yorker as a kind of writing from which you have been liberated, the epitome of, in a way, overwriting by minimizing. My statistics are probably wrong, but roughly 310,000 new books were produced in the US last year through the normal trade process. And something like 700,000 were self-published.
Amazing, yeah.
The explosion of self-publishing is amazing. I mean, authors are now everywhere. Everyone is an author, as you were saying, and it has a kind of liberating quality. So how to formulate this as a question? The question is, what is authorship now? The New Yorker no longer has this ultimate
seal of approval, and there is this liberating effect that you described. It's fascinating to hear. So where are we going? Are we going to have a world of different kinds of authors, or everyone being an author? It used to be said that books were written for the general public. Now they're written by the general public. So how do you understand this kind of sociological transformation of the condition of the author?
I mean, to the extent that the word author has, authority attached to it, I do actually, it's possible that there will not, that the terms of, that literature and authorship still belong to analog media and to print books. So I was, in my more Bolshevik for the internet days, when I was a real, I didn't see anything wrong with the way that Sovietologists used to be like, Europe will fall and we'll get rid of all this. And so that's, I was really impatient with any Luddite, anyone who was like, I don't want to use a touch screen. I was just like, you better get used to it. I was on a panel with someone who's not like that, Nicholson Baker, who objects so much to digitization that he even wanted the card catalog to be preserved. It's it's a natural for digitization, frankly, like a numerical system. But he missed the cards and so forth. I was talking very excitedly about self-publishing, a lot of which, I was talking first about publishing moving to ebooks and how great that was and how we weren't going to lose anything. And then I was talking about self-publishing, and he said, well, would you self-publish a book and then you just do it in ebook form, right? And I suddenly was like, well, my book I want in rock and leather, and I want it on a shelf. And so the author themselves, the reading public seems to be unwilling to pay much more than $10 or $15 for an ebook. The authors will pay $40,000 to do a print run of their own book. So the one person that will pay a lot for a book is the author themselves. Because, my grandfather self-published a book for his grandchildren, beautifully printed. It was called vanity publishing in those days. And I'm still not sure where vanity publishing ends and self-publishing begins. And I don't know. I mean, I'd like to ask Robin, because the KPL was close to, a little bit close to self-publishing.
Totally.
Yeah, so didn't you feel like you were minted when it was made a real book? That was the moment that the New Yorker editor says, you're good enough. And the vanity thing has to disappear at some point.
I'll tell you, it was actually, so the short answer is no. I probably should have, though. And because here's what I learned, actually, in that process. I didn't know about this, because like you, I was, and in some ways, in some respects, I still am such a sort of internet patriot. Both a native of and kind of a ardent, patriot of the internet. The internet nation. And so what I didn't realize, and what I didn't really know about as a civilian reader at that point, was the intellectual supply chain, and really the set of social arrangements that surround, established publishers and publishing houses and libraries and bookstores and all the way that those things are woven together. And I mean, I knew that there was a social component to publishing, because I knew I had to promote my own little self-published thing online and tell people about it, and that the fact that I knew people online or people read me online was important to its success. But in retrospect, I see that was if we were going to draw it on a whiteboard, that would just be like a little star with a few spokes, and then I was suddenly placed in this other system that was like a dense, rich mesh, because it's so old and so established and has all these interesting feelings and senses of authority built into it.
So and you're talking about booksellers and salespeople and reviewers and the whole old infrastructure.
Librarians, the whole system. I mean, it's a very impressive system and a very powerful system.
Right.
And but I didn't actually understand that I was being sucked up into that. And it was only after the book came out and I experienced the rush of that, the very sort of slow, quiet rush of that I was like, oh, this is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
I just want to interject something about that question. Malcolm Cowley once said that a writer is somebody who has readers. which I go back and forth to thinking that's very wise and very cynical, because if you've written it and no one reads it, are you a writer? But one of the things that's sort of from vanity publishing to self-publishing to actual, Random House publishing is that the authors who get the most readers are the ones who are. There are different opportunities, let's put it that way, to get lots of readers and for writers to get lots of readers. And it's almost that's very destabilized right now. Because it used to be that the New Yorker would say, read this, or Bennett Cerf would say, read this. And those even though I love Robin describing this system because it's a very robust notion of it.
Yes.
But the levers are changing.
Yeah. One quick thing is Paul Graham, who started Y Combinator, which is like just an incubation VC in San Francisco, who has an enormous amount of intellectual authority and is this like runic source of wisdom about how to make money. I talked to him recently, and he had just redesigned his bio because, a person like him, the same way that, Warren Buffett, half of his mystique is his prescription for making money that he writes and codifies in books, and then the other half is how he does make the money. And Paul Graham had just changed his bio to say essayist, something, and venture capitalist. And he was so hard to get on the phone as a journalist, and he was like so reluctant to tell me anything, and he's English, and he's kind of intimidating. And at the end of the call, he said, "Do you think I could get one of my essays in the New Yorker?" Like, that is still an aspiration, And, it's like me wanting the Moroccan leather. He's so rich.
He's so rich.
That's all he
doesn't need anything.
Right. You would think he doesn't need anything, but you cannot buy your way into the New Yorker. And that makes it covetable by the Elon Musks of the world and by the people who.
Well, and you see this fetishization of that
Right.
world in a lot of the new media startups that have popped up recently.
And by the way, thank
the amount of money thrown
God,
around.
where the Eastern establishment, like including the Library of Congress, would have no authority with those Silicon Valley guys. They would just like move to Mars and knock us all out. we have to constantly.
I think that's still happening.
Yeah, you're right. But we have to constantly be like, but there's still something very important about the New Yorker. And,
Sure, of course.
Yeah, please.
Yes. You may have the last word.
No, I don't want. But this is apropos of the DPLA. So I think the DPLA is developing a real interest in authorship and has a role in this. And one way this can happen is through something that you may not know of called the Authors Alliance. So we have created a kind of voluntary organization in which authors give over the use of their copyrights for open access publishing. And the DPLA can make these books available. It's, I think, crucial for authors to understand that their books, if you're talking about money, which you did bring up, cease to sell very rapidly. What is the commercial life expectancy of a book? It depends on the field and so on, but often weeks, months, rarely more than years. So why can't we have a system in which all kinds of authors make available on open access their books? They're not sacrificing anything because they don't make money beyond a certain point, but they're getting something, namely readers and access to readership. So that sounds like a commercial, but I really feel that the DPLA has a role to play in this very interesting new landscape you've described so well.
Great.
Yeah, I like that.
Are we done? So I don't know if you can answer this quickly, but I was just wondering if each of you had a piece of advice for a young writer, aspiring author coming up today.
I do think I have come to believe that what books are, of all sizes and shapes, digital and analog, is a set of social arrangements and social relationships.
Right.
And so I do think the most valuable thing you can do is start to build that little web of your own. It sounds sort of banal and cliched to say because we just talk so much about marketing and self-promotion and things like that, but it's still the truth. I think that the gap between, talk about readers, the gap between like 0 readers and 15 readers, like real readers, not drive-by people who found something on the internet and then moved on to the next thing, but people who are like, oh, I like this. This is my kind of thing. Like, if you can get from 0 to 15 or 35, that's the challenge. Because if you have 35, you can get 60. If you have 60, you can probably get 200, and then, I mean, forget it.
Right.
You know, then you're on your way. So I would say but it's hard to do because 35 readers, you know, and like you know all of them, they're like half are related to you or whatever. That's not the vision.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
That's not, you have to. I guess that's what I would say. I'd be like, start an email list, add 35 people, and know that that's the first like foundation stone of whatever's going to come, because
That's
it has
smart.
to be by definition.
Yep.
It's funny how email feels like the fresh new place, right? Like
Yeah.
I like getting, it's Sunday night, you talk about the Sunday night email rush, the mailing list. Sunday night comes and like all of my favorite things come from
Yeah.
all over the world, from all these different writers. And it's very weird. It's
And
like
they're
it's kind
written.
of like
The other
RSS.
thing is they're written.
Yeah, like people take it really seriously.
Yeah.
You know, like a working library. You know, when she sends out
Virginia, do you have a newsletter?
I don't.
So, okay.
No, and newsletters are it. So
Yeah.
no.
Craig and Robin do. They're very good. You should
They're
subscribe.
really good.
and a working library has a great one too that comes out like once every 6 months. But when it does, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, spend so much time on it, so much love.
So the book is called Magic and Loss, my book, and coming out in June. And the magic is what I described as the sort of Bolshevik thing. The loss is, I think, the sense of grief that all of us feel, not just like cultural elites or people left out of the digital divide in this digital revolution. And I now believe that a young writer, if maybe this sounds like jargon, but ought to get in touch with the part of her that feels that resists digitization. So like you talked about the social relationships. We've had an online relationship for a while, but when I saw you, it's so funny because the internet has jacked up the values of personal interactions. So it's like, we could just be meeting as 2 panelists who kind of knew each other's work. But instead, it's like, we hugged each other, hello, even though we've never met in person, because like suddenly the human body is like, it's like the critic Elaine Scarry says, like, we think imagination is so great. And then you compare the dry, imagination to like the sensory emotional world of like bodies, The Navy is training people with sextants and compasses and celestial navigation now because they fear an attack on GPS. If we make all of our interactions with the physical world based in abstract maps, then we, have lost the role of like magnets and stars. And so get in touch with earlier technologies like printing and find the part of you that is, that loves leather or loves live music and not MP3s or whatever. Because not only will that affect the medium that you work in, but also that's your story to tell. That's your story, That's that particular kind of exquisite pain is, I think, a wonderful narrative. At least I can't get enough of it.
I would just say, sort of to your point, Virginia, like don't be afraid of technology. And in fact, the most interesting intersections, I think, of writing or creating or authorship today are happening at these weird fuzzy boundaries of tech and printing. One of my favorite examples is a photographer, artist, Mishka Henner, a British photographer, and he's kind of come to light in the last 5 or 6 years because he started printing out Google Maps satellite photos. Like that was his thing. And so like he'd go and find all of the US hidden army bases around the world on Google Maps and then print that out and call it like 51 bases. Or doing other things with print on demand. And it was funny, it was like the printing of the stuff. Like he'd collate these collections of photos, but it was the printing that allowed like the Tate to acquire it. And the Tate acquiring it was the thing that allowed him to be a real artist. And that allowed him all these other affordances. But it was only because he was willing to play in this kind of space of like, well, what is photography? Well, photography is, you know, being interested in light and imagery. And well, what if I use Google Maps to find these things, or Google Street View to find, you know, people that are kind of accidentally in these collections of data. And if I take that, draw a box around it, give it the boundaries, and then use cheap print on demand to put it out in the world as an artifact, like it sounds simple, but that's actually quite a few like kind of like jumps to make and willingness to experiment. And I think that like his body of work and the recognition he's got is a great example of what happens when you start to play in that space. So I think there's lots of opportunity there.
Thank you guys so much. We could go for another hour and a half, but we're already over time.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.